All right, if we can get the meeting started, if anybody else comes in later, they'll just have to learn everything afterwards. If you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. It's I guess kind of a good day. We got a truce with Iran, and we aren't destroying the nation over there, and hopefully we'll keep praying that things are going to be all right, and our gas prices will come down, and God bless America. Anyway, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. I've got a couple of people that had some issues that they couldn't attend, but we've got a lot to cover, so if we can get started. I'd like to start with introductions. I'm George Topple, Union Township Trustee, Commissioner at NERC, and have been for quite a while. And
I'm Imad Ibrahim, Planning Manager here at NERC.
Joe Rosales, retired Chief Operating Officer, but current Staff Support Advisor for the Northwest Indiana Realtor Association.
John Makrushin, County Surveyor for LaPorte County.
Gary Johnson, Board Chair at the Society of Innovators at Purdue Northwest, and I worked on the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy with NERC.
Michelle Verde, Pruiso, Northwest Indiana Forum.
Dave Wellman, RDA.
Meredith Stillwell, Director of Administration, NERC.
Tom Redwood, NERC.
Scott Weber, NERC.
Grace Gunninger, NERC.
I believe they're at NERC.
Working on the Northwest Indiana Regional Growth.
Hey, well, welcome everyone. If we can get everybody, hopefully somebody had a chance to take a look at the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And we have a second, so period. Is there any further discussion? If none, minutes are approved. Moving right along, economy in place for 2.1, Northwest Indiana Regional Development. Catalyst grant is what we're going to be talking about. David Wellman, Director of Communications for the RDA, is here to tell us all about it.
Sure.
Take it away, Dave.
Thanks. Thank you, sir. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come here. We always appreciate the chance to tell what we're doing.
Appreciate you for being here.
And thanks to Juan for inviting us. So excellent. I hope everybody got one. I don't know if we got everybody in the audience once. One, I'll have these available afterwards. So the Development Catalyst Grant. This is a new program the RDA has launched. It grew out of our work with Pines and Beverly Shores while we were putting their transit development district together. These are great communities. They have a lot of people who are very passionate about government, very passionate about their communities, very passionate about what the future can hold for them. But they're also very small communities, don't have a lot of resources. And we started to think about, and they're certainly not the only ones in Northwest Indiana facing that situation. And we started thinking about ways that we could help them to increase capacity on a temporary basis, because we didn't want to see things like planning for development and having people available to meet with people who are interested in building things and creating new jobs and opportunities in their communities to get missed in the process. So this is why we developed this program. The idea behind it is to give out a series of small grants. We're looking to kind of hold, we have $250,000 initially into this program, and we intend to expand that, assuming that, increase that amount, assuming that things go well and it proves successful. But as you can see, we have this laid out here, and things we're looking at are like policy and regulatory preparedness, marketing and recruitment materials, technical studies and analysis, site planning. Again, these are a lot of things that communities need to do ahead of development, especially the ones that are in our transit development districts and are looking at looking at increased interest from developers now that the rail projects are finished. And that's basically it. It's not a super complicated concept. Happy to answer any questions about it.
I have a question.
Sure.
We have 130 and 30 that runs through our township, and there's a lot of potential going on. We still don't know about the potential that happens with if we do get the bears. And it looks like it's still a distinct possibility.
Right.
But with all that, there will be a number of things that will happen, including the corridors of 30 and the transit districts, which would be bus routes and things that we're talking about at transportation from NERC. And what my concern is, for all the unincorporated areas that don't have resources, are you a source that could help put together where we're going and how we get there?
Absolutely. You're exactly the kind of community that we would be looking to help with these grants.
Excellent.
Sure.
Is there a maximum or minimum recommended amount?
I think right now at this point, I don't think we put an official number on it, but since we only have 250,000, we want to try to maximize that and help as many communities as possible. So I would probably say we're looking maximum about 50,000 for a grant. There is a match requirement of at least 10%, and the more you can match, the better your chances of approval are.
What is the match on the estimated 50,000 or whatever?
Well, you'd have to put at least 10%.
10%.
So that'd be 5. So
Okay, that's
right.
doable even for somebody that doesn't have too much money. So.
Exactly. That's the idea. We temporarily boost this capacity, give you the opportunity to get these things done that otherwise you probably wouldn't be able to do.
Even at that, there would still be a need to have additional grants. Would that be something that you might be able to lead us into?
Sure, we'd be happy to point you toward anything else that we're aware of. And you know, and in fact, we've had one inquiry on this program already, which would involve counting us 4 total entities. So this would be part of a package that would.
It's too late for this year, but I'm on the board of the Coastal Advisory Program for the Lake Michigan Coastal Program. And if I understand correctly, this could be used as part of that match, and you can probably coordinate proposals.
Right, exactly.
You know that Lake Michigan Coastal area?
Yeah.
It's many years ago, I think it was 10. We were near getting a grant through Lake Michigan Coastal for a possible incorporation in the plan for 30 square miles.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there were some issues that came up and we lost a big key piece of property in it. And then Purdue pulled out, Lake Michigan pulled out. And now we're trying to get back to where we were 10 years ago. So if we could talk afterwards, specifically for my concerns, I would be happy to do that. Joe, I know we've talked about it before. So anyway, I'll get
Well,
off
we're
my
at the final
high
stages
horse.
of it for this year. We've had grant requests and they've been screened, and we're getting ready to recommend the ones for approval this year. I think we'll end up with about $600,000 to award in total this year as well, which has been the number since I've been on the board.
Hey, Joe.
Dave, we've been working with the Lake County Parks Department on the update of their master plan, and it's like 2 phases. One phase was last year, another phase is this year. So I know we see here comprehensive plan amendments, and that would the Lake County Parks Department master plan update qualify for something like this, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't say no.
Right.
Certainly, you know, we're trying to again focus this on communities that are kind of lacking in resources and might need a little bit of extra. But again, I mean, everybody, especially with the with SB1 and all the property tax changes and everything, everybody's cash strapped at the moment. So certainly we would listen to it. AJ Bittner, our economic development director, will have a formal application ready for this soon. That's one of the little bits and pieces we still have to put together. I would encourage you to apply and put it in. The worst thing that happens is we say no.
Okay.
In light of you working with Lake County, I know that Porter County Parks, I've been talking to them to see about trying to do a joint venture.
Mhm.
So maybe we could also talk about that later on and tie things in, because we're looking to establish more parks in the area,
Yeah,
and we're looking to come up with a plan for the future. So the master plan would be the next step on top of the Porter County Comprehensive Plan, which is in progress right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what their current status is.
yeah, we work with both the Lake County and Porter County Parks Departments over the course of time. Every 5 years, they have to update their master plans, and this is Lake County's, I think, going in their 5th or 6th year on it, and COVID kind of slowed them down. So I'm just trying to look at all alternate ways to help, basically. Okay.
Absolutely. Sure.
So where it's got brownfield redevelopment,
Mhm.
would that be like a phase 2 ESA?
Yeah, we could look at, certainly we do phase ones, we can do phase two, and of course, the RDA also has we have a brownfield revolving loan fund, and we can do sub-grants out of that, so if there are brownfield stuff, and we can't do it through this, talk to me about using some of the brownfield funds to do that, so. Absolutely.
Okay, are there any other questions for Dave? Dave, I'd like to thank you very much.
No.
Appreciate it, and please, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of our
Sure.
thing, and we'll talk after.
Absolutely, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Tom Vanderwolf is here to tell us about that. Tom, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce this presentation, and then some fellow NERC staff will kind of continue it. So, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the progress that we've made on the update to our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which we call the MTP. We want to just kind of review the background on this project and talk about the timeline going forward. And then we'd also like, for those of you who are here, to review and discuss the existing conditions data that we'll present and the performance measures that we'll present today. So we're going to kind of go through a few different elements of the plan and the background data, and we encourage everyone here just to listen, and if you have questions during this presentation, please ask them. If you have comments, if there are things that don't make sense to you that you think need some clarification, please let us know. This is going to be, this information, this data will be packaged into a final document in the coming months. And it'll also be presented at a series of public and stakeholder meetings. So we want to get any feedback that we can before we do that, so that we have good data, and we're making sure that we're being clear about what we're saying. So I was here at our last meeting talking a little bit about this, so this is a bit of a review. But the background of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan is every 4 years, NERC as a Metropolitan Planning Organization is required to complete an MTP, either a brand new document or an update to an existing document. But it has to be a major update, meaning it has to have public participation. It has to have a sort of a public, it can't just be done like in the back room where we change some numbers and letters. It has to actually be a full-on amendment where we review it with the public, we update all of the data, including socioeconomic forecasts and those types of things. So the update that we're working on now is kind of on the lighter side. It's not a full brand new document. We're going to carry over the vision and major goals of NWI 2050 Plus, which is our existing MTP. We're not extending out our horizon year. So it's a long-range plan, meaning that it must have a minimum of 20-year horizon. We're going to keep that at 2050. And then we're also going to maintain the organization of NWI 2050 Plus. And when I say maintain the organization, this is sort of the chapter framework for the plan. These are the major topics that we cover in the plan. And so the presentation today is going to cover a number of those topics. It's going to be kind of organized in that fashion. Where we are right now is we're at the point where we're trying to incorporate new data, and which will be used to generate public and stakeholder feedback. And we're updating all the federal and regional performance measures, which are things that we track to determine whether or not we're making progress towards the goals that we've set in the plan. And then indicators, which are certain data that, again, we track over time, and if it's moving in a good, we can kind of tell, is this moving in a positive direction or is it moving in a negative direction? So that's kind of where we are at this point. Going forward over the next few months, we'll be updating socioeconomic forecast, the financial plan, and then ultimately conducting the air quality conformity analysis for the regionally significant projects. So here is where we are on our draft project timeline. We're anticipating adoption of a final document at the end of June of next year. So June of 2027. We are talking today about what we are calling the Regional Profile and Performance Report. That's essentially an existing conditions document. And we're finalizing that information, which is why we're bringing it out to you, with the idea that we would be using it, as I said, for review and analysis in a public and stakeholder engagement process. That'll be, so this information will kind of serve as input to determine where are we making progress, where do we need to change, and how do we identify specific implementation actions at NERC to accomplish those goals or change the trajectory of those performance measures. Again, we have really two ways to implement our plan. One is through our transportation improvement program, which is a list, which is the highway projects that we select, highway and transit projects we select for federal investment. And secondarily through our Unified Plan and Work program, which are the plans and studies and technical assistance work that we do at the staff level. So that's what we'll be focused on based on the data that we have compiled today. So having said that, if there are any questions for me about the process, I will take them. Otherwise, I'm going to hand the clicker to Grace, who's going to kind of walk us through the demographic part of the project.
Morning, Grace.
Good morning. So one of the first steps in developing this regional profile involved the collection of data that's relevant to our MTP update. So data was organized, summarized, and visualized through the development of maps and charts, which you'll see here today. And as the foundation, demographic data was first examined. So here are the population pyramids for Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties. And so this data represents the past 5 years, so 2020 through 2024, using the 2024 5-year estimates from the American Community Survey through the U.S. Census.
What is on the axes? Can you orient us a little bit? Is it possible to read?
So there is age distribution, so starting at under 5 and then 3 to 5, going all the way up until I believe 80, and then it's split in half between male and female, and again with a percentage of, or the number of population in each category as you go up.
Thanks.
And this is a common thing used in the urban planning world to visualize population.
Which is on the left and which is on the right?
The male is in blue, female's in orangish yellow.
But not pink.
Yeah, I should think pink, yeah.
So looking at the shape of these population pyramids, NERC at this point would be considered an aging population and is in this kind of stage 5, the demographic transition model, which is characterized by low birth rates and low death rates while population plateaus. And here is a similar kind of more generalized population pyramid that represents kind of what we're seeing in Lake Porter and LaPorte counties, where you have more this bulk in working age population with more retired dependents. So This type of population pyramid is characterized as having a high dependency ratio, where you have fewer working age people to support the growing number of older adults. And this is due to healthier older population through improved healthcare as well as living conditions. So here we have the population density for the area as of 2024. And this shows the distribution of people throughout the region. The darker colors show the higher density areas. And as you'll note, a lot of, especially up here, a lot of the smaller block groups tend to have the highest density. And that's pretty typical considering that each block group is drawn using population, where they like to have 600 to 3,000 people per block group, with 1,500 people being the optimal size. So the less area you have, the higher population density you're more likely to have. So next we'll look at population change over time, specifically looking at our cities, towns, and census designated places. So as you can see, there are large increases typically in cities and towns that are along our urban edge, especially, along the urban edge, and then in the urban core, especially in northern Lake County, you can see that population was either maintained or slightly decreased. And then specific rural centers, you can see there are some that had pretty drastic decreases, while others, rural areas, were newly developed census designated places, meaning that they had population or housing increase to the point where it was recognized by the census.
Hey Grace,
Mhm.
just a quick question. So the dark green north of Ferry,
Mm-hmm.
this is a county, right? It's not municipality. I remember, I think this area is still like belong to Lake County.
Here?
There.
Yeah, this is Shorewood Forest, so that's
No. Up on the left, the dark green.
Calumet Township.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
That's the rectangle in the center of the.
Oh yeah, that's Ross.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that's part of the county, but
County,
it's
right?
now been a
Designated area?
yes.
Yes, okay,
Census.
thank you.
Not incorporated.
No, it's not incorporated. It's just a
Yeah,
census
unincorporated,
designated.
okay.
place. So here is a chart that shows population by place, and so this is just the raw total number of people as an estimate that each city gained or lost between 2014 and 2024. So you'll see that the 2014 population is represented by the blue line that's on the bottom level, and the 2024 population is represented by the orange line, which is on top. So looking at just the straight estimate of people that were gained or lost, you can see that St. John, Crown Point, and Cedar Lake had the most population gain, where Gary, East Chicago, and Hammond had the most population lost. However, if you look at how population has changed based on what the population was in 2014 versus what it is in 2024, it's kind of a different story. You'll see that Hannah, Winfield, and St. John had the most relative percent increase, where Shelby, Rolling Prairie, and Kingsbury had the biggest percentage of decrease. So again, kind of going back to these newly census designated places, there have been 11 that have been created from 2014 to 2020. And census designated places are exclusively unincorporated areas that are locally recognized, contain some population or housing units, and are statistically equivalent to incorporated areas based on the mix of residential, non-residential, and commercial uses. So they're similar to incorporated places, but they aren't incorporated, but they're at least recognized to the point where the census has determined that it is a place to develop metrics for. And then those with the highest population density were, again, Ross Township, Lake Eliza, and Wellsboro. So here we kind of look at employment density. So this is kind of defined as where workers live. So when you answer the census, you'll check off, yes, I'm employed, and that kind of gets represented by where you live, your residence, which can be a little different, or sorry, this is mirrored by the population density, again, because we're looking at residences. And so when looking at areas that are similar and dissimilar between where workers live and population density, you can see kind of where areas are similar and where areas are dissimilar. And so the areas in red are where it is similar, where you would have a higher ratio of the population that's employed, versus the dissimilar areas where you would potentially have a lower working population. And so toggling between them, you can see that most of the similar areas are in urban centers or in rural centers, where the most discrepancies lie just outside of the urban areas and like the more suburban areas or along these commuting corridors, especially along 109th Broadway and then Johnson Road and 35. So with where workers live, we also want to examine where workers are working. So in pink, you can see the major employment centers, which were created using density of businesses that was weighted by number of employees. So looking at this, you can kind of see areas that are disaligned are referred to as spatial mismatch. And this can indicate areas that fail to meet housing demand, areas that have increased commute lengths, as well as potential congestion, which may lead to increased vehicle emissions. So looking at these employment centers and where they are over time, you'll see that in brown, these circles were developed in NRPC's 2040 plan as areas that should be planned for as major economic centers. However, you can see that the heat map that has the yellow and green scale, that again was using a density-based assessment, looking at, again, businesses weighted by number of employees. So you can see that where businesses are, where these economic centers are, aren't exactly where they were planned for in NRPC's 2040 plan. However, they have been fairly consistent between the 2050 plan and our current assessment.
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, many of these areas that don't have colors are farms or businesses, but they employ a lot of people. Is that the understanding?
Right. So when looking at this density, we're looking at, how many businesses are in an area and then how many people they employ. Where a farm, that's going to be acres and acres and acres with, it might be 100 people, but distributed over that large area. It's not necessarily, a place where many businesses are congregated that employ a large amount of people across a number of industries.
Well, being from a community that has a lot of farms, I will get that question from a number of people, so I want to have the answer, that we're on the same page.
Yes. Yeah, not that that isn't important or it's not happening, but these are the areas where it's very condensed.
I have one quick question.
Yes.
So like on our major industries along the lakefront, I'm assuming their circle is just represented like where their administration office is? Is
Yeah,
that the address?
I believe so. I would have to go back.
And they have the Great Lakes, the construction advancement, so they have multiple
Okay.
employers here, yeah, it's not just this area,
Okay.
it's wider
Right.
than that, yeah. But I just wanna make a comment about the 2040 economics, like area or indicator, the one in like yellow, orangey
Mm-hmm.
color, it's actually happening, because I see, for example, the Porter County Airport, which is right of 49.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually got employment, and I see also the hospital in Porter in the intersection of US 6 and 49. That's another like major employment
Mm-hmm.
and doctor offices here in this area. So it was actually projected in 2040, but it really happened because at that time wasn't that much employment in these areas, and other examples too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So continue on, looking back at population change at a more granular level at the block group level as opposed to having it summarized by individual place, you can kind of start to see exactly where we're having increases and decreases. So the light blue indicates any sort of decrease, while the deeper shades of blue show the different levels of increase. So you can see that most population change, again, happens along that urban boundary with notable increases in Whiting, Porter, as well as along the I-65 corridor from Maryville to Crown Point, as well as downtown LaPorte. So just as a refresher, this is our current urban area that's in like the lighter transparent versus the 2010 urban area, which is the solid colors. So again, you'll see a lot of that population increase where you can see this transparency where the urban center has grown. Going back, this is the outline, so you'll see areas like South St. John, South Lake County, the Lakes of the Four Seasons Winfield area, Westville, and then east and north in Michigan City and LaPorte. There are some noticeable increases there. So finally, we'll take a look at a few economic metrics. So this is the median household income for the area, and this is one of the best indicators for financial well-being. So you'll see that the urban core tends to have the lowest median income, or urban centers, which can indicate higher concentrations of poverty or areas that might be experiencing economic distress. This is really a common trend across the country, in that urban centers often have a higher population of households that earn less than 60% of the area's median income, with Northwest Indiana's median income being approximately $75,000. So you'll see that a lot of the lighter colors kind of sit underneath that value. And then we also can look at the median housing value. Again, this shows the middle housing or home value so that it excludes any sort of extreme outliers for, very expensive house or very inexpensive house. And where you have the darker colors or the more expensive housing values, this can show where housing demand is rising or potentially areas with a strong local economy. So when you kind of combine these two metrics, you'll get the ratio of the price to income, which examines the median home price over the median household income. So the darker colors, again, where the housing cost is rising faster than the income ratio, this can indicate areas with potentially low economic health or a shifting housing market, and this can also help shed some light on housing affordability. So with that, we'll segue into land use and housing.
Did you put all of this data together?
Yes.
It's impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next on the agenda, we have Iman Ibrahim, talk about land use and housing update. It's all yours.
Okay. Morning, everyone. So as Tom mentioned, that the MTP update, this time it's basically based on the performance measures that came as indicators for us to look at the improvements, changes, decline, reduction. So we wanted to test these performance measures that came from the NWI 2050 plan and also came from the NWI 2050 plan plus. So as we go through that, so we're gonna start going one by one of the performance measures. For the land use and housing, we have about 15 performance measures. Today I'm working with about 12. We still have 3 that need more in-depth analysis, so I'm going to talk about this in the next meeting. So one of the indicators here is to track the developed land, and specifically we wanted to see where is new development is going. Is happening in the urban area, or is happening in unincorporated, or utilizing agricultural land or unforested land. So that's the reason we're looking for the last 10 years of land cover and see the changes here. So the map on the right here showing all the land cover types, categories, and to make it more simple, like the pink to dark red color, that's all the developed land, including also developed open space, which is classified as the areas that has not at least maximum 20% constructed materials. And it's including like managed vegetations like lawn, park, golf courses, cemeteries, because it's maintained. So they call it developed open space. And we also have like a different intensity of development. And developed land, by the way, including industrial, commercial, residential, and other uses. So it's not just residential area. So the chart on the left here showing that we lost about 3% of agricultural land, and we developed about 5% increased in developed land, and then we lost some of the water, open water, which it could be turned to a wetland, immersion grass, or any other uses. We got like more of sand and clay within the area in the last 10 years. So that's the classification of the land cover. Moving to the next one, here is showing also where are the new development happening. And in this one here, it's happening like basically around municipalities, some here, but not much, around Valparaiso, around Winfield here, Crown Point, like Schererville, San John, and Cedar Lake. So it's all outside most of the suburban communities. If we compare that to the 2040 plan, we had most of the development, like within 15 years, happened scattered all over the county. So especially between Michigan City and LaPorte, and we had a lot of scattered development here and around here. So this time in the last 10 years, we have like less unincorporated development happening, which is a good news. So it's happening around the perimeter of the communities where the infrastructure and the utilities are happening. So that's what we're looking for. So we had some recommendation, but the communities, most of the communities did really well having the development around the communities. Also, we have recommendations came out of the NWI 2050 plus. The goal is we would like to have more people coming to the area here, and we are expecting the yearly growth of 0.55%. And so what I did here, I tracked the development in the last 5 years from 2021 all the way to 2025 to see if we're really going towards the goal or not. So as you see, 2025, actually we have like a 0.3% increase, 2024, which is very much meeting the goals, 0.5%. But in 2023, actually we lost some people, and also in 2022, and that's the pandemic time, and that's like we didn't have much changes and growth within the area. So that's something also to track if we're really going towards the goal of the 2050 plus. We also looked at the housing, but here looked at the housing in the last 10 years and to see the changes happening within the area. So county by county and also for the Northwest Indiana region. So Lake County in general, the housing increased by 3%. The highest was Porter County, which is housing increased by 6%, and in LaPorte County, 2%. So that's like a 10 years range, but we're still looking for increase of 4% every year because we're still lacking a lot of housing, and we're gonna explain that comingly. However, we still have like a high vacancy rate in some area. So for example, LaPorte County has like 13% vacancy rate. Porter County has the least vacancy, which is 6%. That's very much the national average. It's a good percentage still as a 6%, but Lake County has 10%, and most of these vacancy actually in the urban core communities. So we have to consider, we need to new housing, but also have vacancy rate and how we balance between that. And that's, by the way, it's just we're looking at the regional profile. So where we are, the emergent condition, but like in the next phase, we're gonna start to have like more in-depth analysis to see where is that happening? Why you have these? Are these vacant houses really, good in a good condition so people can utilize it, or do we need to have like some sort of free development programs? And that's what we're doing this analysis. We're doing this regional profile so we can make some recommendations from the regional level, which can help the local governments. We also looked at the agriculture and open space here, and the land cover changes, and how much we lost. So as we see the cultivated crops, which is agriculture land, we lost over 9,000 acres, and it's all went for development. And it's, as you see, all of this like orange color, all of the new development around municipalities utilized agriculture land. And that's something we wanted to limit, but like as long not in the conservation area, which is this area that has most of the agriculture land, we're still okay with that, but we wanted to limit that as much as we can. We also lost some of, we gained some open space, but we lost some open space also for development, but it's a very limited. Maybe you can see it in the map, so like some dark purple colors here. And the green also is not as much, but also we lost some natural area for development. So, but the reason we're looking at this performance measure specifically, because we wanted to explore the non-farm development in agricultural areas. So we wanted to track that. We wanted to see also the decrease of the open space and the forested land, how much trees we cut, that like we got rid of forested area, and also the adverse impact for wildlife and habitat, and of course it's impacting drainage and soil patterns. That's why we're looking into that. Yeah.
Excuse me, man. Do you have any indication or any idea as to what effect the loss of that cultivated crop acreage has on the local food supply? Or was that loss of that acreage, like those crops being sold into an international or national food supply chain versus used here locally?
I'm not sure about that. I know that Grace is working in the food system, but that's a good question to look into that. Is that possible?
Yeah, the Northwest Indiana Food Council came out with a 2024 regional food assessment that kind of goes into more depth about the loss of prime agricultural farmland and the impacts on the local food system.
Does it seem like we'd be cutting our nose to spite our face, that we're looking to gain development, but we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. So it's kind of like, just something that kind of just came to my mind here.
It's unfortunate Councilman Vasquez can't be here today.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he would be able to address that.
Yeah. Joe, tell me if I'm reading your question correctly. You're kind of asking, are we looking at farm fields that are growing common crops such as corn and soybeans that are getting converted into other uses versus something that's growing like produce, like tomatoes or something that we find on a local market versus something that's this international commodity that doesn't really affect us other than.
Or like soybeans that are being sold to China or wherever, that really, the loss of that farmland might affect the income level locally, but it wouldn't necessarily affect the food supply versus something like you were just describing, like, something that would be used here locally that now that food supply chain is being stressed because of the loss of farmland.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also I think we may need to add urban agriculture as in the regional profile. Yeah. So as we look at the growing of urban agriculture area within urbanized area. So,
yeah, I know there's a national organization that I just recently, not in time for this report, that looks at both prime farmland loss and then the projected loss of farmland. So that, I think that data will be a little more specific to the type of agriculture.
Grace, I was wondering if and when you look into that perhaps you could take some of the local farmers that from Lake Port and LaPorte County, maybe a couple of them sample and get their feedback, because I think they might be a good source of information. I'm sure you can identify them, or not, I can help you. Gary?
This probably isn't a very important point, but I'm curious how we lost 389 acres of open water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I investigated that, and I found that it's some open water turned into like forested wet or wetland, or because of the drainage issue. So it just turned to a different use.
So it was more or less a natural process.
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of like when they do
seems like that might be something in your category.
So when they do this land cover change, right, they're reviewing aerial
photos.
I see.
So they're identifying some area that looked like a wetland at one point, like a woody wetland.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back and look at it 10 years later, now it looks like open water.
I see.
So they classify it as that.
Okay.
And then maybe some additional vegetation grows in there, and now they're calling it something different.
So it's not like someone filled in a pond to build houses.
No, not necessarily. I mean,
it's actually they use the remote sensing.
Yeah, I got
to
it.
do that with the infrared, so they can tell if it's water or not.
So it's not something to be especially concerned about.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Johnny has a comment.
Wondering how soon there will be an update. This ended in 24. a lot of the solar farm and the data centers comes in after 24. For example, the city of LaPorte recently annexed 1,000 acres that had been agricultural use, still undefined how it's going to be done. There's a rumor that there will be a data center. They have an additional 500 acres roughly that already is declared to be a data center.
Okay.
That's not included in here.
Yeah, but that's the next phase.
That would be your next report.
Yeah, it's actually, we are going to have like a group specifically working on land use and housing. And then we're gonna have like a small like workshops on maps so communities can work on that and see, you know, like this is happening here, this is happening here. And that's another thing that like we would be considering. So now we're working with the mapping, census data, and we're trying to collect as much as we can. But like we wanted also to collect more data at the local level, and that's the next phase. One of the performance measures also was to look at the population change in main centers, which is the downtown area and the community centers and major neighborhoods. And we have a map showing that was created by NERC in 2013 through creating livable communities. And we're using this map also as one of the criteria for the transportation projects funding, the NOFA. And that's important. We would like to see still like more people living around these community centers and downtown area. So we track the increase of population in this area. I don't have all the communities here, but I have the data, so we will have it in appendix in the report. But this is like the top population increase within the communities, and showing here like Winfield and Miller area, Etna, Lake Station, Crown Point, South LaPorte, the district of Valparaiso University. So we have a different area, which is a lot. I'm not gonna go over each one here, but that's what's showing. At least it's, you know, like some of them in new suburban area that was developed in the last 30 years or so, and some of them for older communities, which is good that we still see people living around the downtown area. We did the same for the employment also, to see if we have more employment, because we would like more people to work in the main centers so they can have access the workplace and also the nearby neighborhoods, and also enjoying all the amenities and transportation options around the main centers. And we have also, it's very similar to the population increase. So we see also some area have both, have population increase and they have also employment increase within this area. So that's one of the things that we are tracking here too. One of the measure also is to look at the percent of the household burdened by the housing cost. If they are paying more than 30% of their household income, that's considered burden. And we look at the 3-county area. The state in general, they have about 26.5% of all the household in Indiana paying over 30% of their income on housing. Lake County 21. So in general, we're doing much better than the state. So Lake County, Porter, and LaPorte County, we're still in the 21 or 22%. That's for homeowners that they are paying mortgage over 30%. For renters, that's the bad news, that like they pay too much. So we have almost in Lake County 51% of the households number paying over 30% of their income in rent. So which is considered high. So because we're lacking also the rental facilities and multifamily. So we don't have enough inventory to meet the demand of the renter. That's why we have a higher number paying over 30% of their income. The map, which is Grace showed you this map before, but like this is showing again the household income with the darker green. The highest income is concentrated within this area, and the lower is either in a rural area or in the urban core communities. And that's what we're looking, what type of housing we need, that meet the household income. So we know which area to build, like the housing in a price range that meet the median household income. So we also looked at the housing supply and demand, and we have this data was also presented at the NWI 2050 plus, but it was 2020 data. So now we have like more updated data, which is 2024. And here in this one, we look at the different categories. So we look first to the income. So we have, this is the income category here. People making as a household less than 25,000 and people making up to 50,000, and then from 50 to 75. And then what type of housing range that they could meet. So the vast majority is the people making 50,000 up to 50,000 to 75,000. We have plenty of housing. The dark blue here is the number of owners unit, and the rental is the light blue. So we still have a lot available for this income category. But when you look, here is on the edge for people making between 75 and 100,000, the light blue is the number of households, by the way. So if we're showing a gap here, it means that we don't have enough supply for people within this category. The making 100,000 to 200,000, which they can afford a housing between like 400, 500, or something even from 350. So we don't have much supply for that. Even for people that making over 200 up to like 400,000 as a household income, they still also lacking, as you see the number here. We don't have rental. Of course, for this number, it's mostly like minimum rental here, but we don't have enough ownership for this housing, so we're lacking also the number. So this is a very complicated chart, but it just, in the end, we gotta summarize it, what's the need? We're lacking over 25,000 units in general between rental and home ownership for the Lake County, for example. So that's another one, and then we go to the next one here, showing the same analysis for Lake and LaPorte County, and again showing we're lacking. It's almost, like the people making between 50,000 and up to 100,000, they can find housing within their income range. But people doing lower or higher, they have difficulty to find enough supply. And that's just getting these results so we can make recommendations later based on the income map that you show, what price range you should build, like within a specific area. So one of the issue also is middle housing development, which is, we try to track that in the last 10 years. And as you look here, we have the NWI 2050 plus. When we looked at the data, we have about 85% of single family homes that ranges between like 2 units per acre or 1 unit per acre, which is a large lots. And we would like to see a smaller prints of housing, either like a small lots like 4 units per acre to 6 units per acre, like Burns Harbor here, the village. They have a very small, but still single family homes, but a small footprint. So we're encouraging more because we're lacking the middle housing, which is the duplexes, the fourplexes, the townhomes, the apartments, which is a 5 units or more. So we're lacking that, and we track the housing permits within like 20 years between 2003 and 2023, and we look at where is the middle housing going. Maryville is the lead on that. They have really significant middle housing permits. LaPorte also, Hammond, Whiting, East Chicago, Gary, Schererville, and so on, Valparaiso, Michigan City, most of the urban poor communities and older communities. They are the one focusing more in middle housing, but like this is something we would like to encourage people to have a small print single family homes and more of the duplexes. If people still like to have like something similar to single family homes, the duplexes is a second choice after single family homes. So that's another information. That was the last one. Do you have any questions?
Okay, seeing no questions. Thank you, Iman.
Okay, thank you.
And now it's time for Scott Weber.
Great. All right, the next part of the presentation will focus on transportation. So I'll go through what the regional profile is looking like for transportation so far.
Like someone waiting for a train.
So some of the performance measures and metrics that we looked at in the transportation analysis. Well, first of all, we looked at the freight-related employment and the growth between 2019 and 2024. So these are employment industries such as logistics and warehousing and manufacturing and mining and quarrying. And you can see that the overall employment in these sectors rose from about 117,000 to 120,000. So that's good news, and it shows that our region has seen steady growth due to its hub location and e-commerce trends. More people shopping online, of course, naturally leads to more freight-related employment growth. However, when we look at the modal trends of freight actually being moved from our region, this counts for freight that either starts in our region or ends in our region. It does not include freight that just simply flows through our region. We don't have the data for that. But you can see that the weight of freight moving through our region really didn't grow at all in the same period of time for all the modes that we looked at. We looked at truck, pipeline, rail, multiple modes, water, unknown, and air is very small at the bottom there by weight. So this shows that even though our employment grew in freight-related fields, the amount of freight being moved didn't necessarily grow. And then we look at the freight being moved as measured by value. Again, this shows a stagnation, not much growth. There's a little bit of growth here for truck. However, these are not really adjusted for inflation, so the fact that it increased a little bit from 2021 to 2024 doesn't necessarily indicate that there was actually much growth. And again, pipeline, all the modes that we looked at didn't really show much change in terms of freight being moved as measured by value. But keep in mind, this is only freight being moved either starting in a region or ending in a region, not necessarily freight just moving through a region. We also looked at truck-involved crashes. So this is a heat map showing where there were the highest density of crashes that occurred involving trucks. And as you can imagine, most of those were along the interstate highway system. That's where you find the most trucks, and near the interchanges along the interstate highway system. And then those kind of stars are where there were fatalities. And this was the period of time from 2020 to 2024, so 5 years worth of data that went into this analysis. The fatalities were more kind of randomly distributed than the heat map of overall crashes, but again, there's a kind of pattern of them being along I-80-94 in northern Lake County. This is looking at truck travel time reliability. This is one of the performance measures that's federally required that we look at NERC. So this is basically a measure of how variable in time a trucker might expect it to take to travel along a certain corridor. So in other words, if it's more predictable about how long it'll take to travel along a corridor, then it is more reliable, so it's more green. If it's less predictable, and in other words, if some days it might take an hour to travel that stretch, where some days it might only take 20 minutes, then it's less reliable when it's in one of those orange or redder colors. And so where we saw the most reliability in general, this only looks at the interstate systems, by the way. This is where we get the data for this metric. The most unreliable area was along I-80-94, wrong button, in Lake County here. And then the other quarters of interstate, especially along I-65, looks pretty reliable. This was measured in 2025. And as you can see, that orange area along I-94 near the Michigan state line. That might have been due to construction, for example, in that particular season, so that can change year to year. This was in 2025. So then looking at another metric we looked at was freight rail incidents. These are incidents involving freight rail movements. So as you can see, there has been an increase over time in freight rail incidents, but especially from 2024 to 2025. That was led by highway rail crossing incidents. So these are incidents involving a train and a vehicle, or perhaps a pedestrian. And then the other, actually no, the pedestrian would be in the trespasser category. But as you can see that the freight rail incidents did overall kind of not change too much, but it did increase recently from 2024 to 2025. So that's a little bit of a concerning trend. And then non-crossing incidents would be just like track switching issues that the freight rail encountered. And we also looked at blocked crossings. This is a huge priority in our region. Again, this is one of our legislative priorities here at NERC-C, but these are areas where vehicles are stopped for a long time by gates that go down, like maybe being late to a meeting, for example. But you can see that the problem is most pronounced in the northwest corner of our region, particularly in Hammond, East Chicago, and Whiting. And you can see some of these times are quite long. The bottom of that legend scale of 6 to 12 hours. Can you imagine being stopped for 6 to 12 hours by a crossing that's closed? At that point, you would just find another crossing, but still, it gets measured. So it's obviously a huge issue. We have a ton of rail network, railroads that go through our region, so that makes sense. And we also have a bottleneck of all these trains trying to get to Chicago or around Chicago, which causes a lot of congestion for the trains. We also looked at commute trend changes. These are like so Gray showed a picture of like where the workers are living, but this is showing like the movement of workers and where they're going from one area of our region to areas right outside of our region or within our region. So for example, this is looking at the 2 years of 2016 on the left and then 2023 on the right. And so actually there overall wasn't much of a change, which is somewhat surprising given that we had a pandemic during that time. But overall, there was a slight decrease. So for example, from Lake County into Illinois, in 2016, there were 42,118 workers making that commute on average daily. And in 2023, it went down to 41,270. So not really a huge drop. It's just one example. But one thing to keep in mind, these data were based on the Stats Indiana IT 40 tax return data. So it doesn't necessarily distinguish if someone's a hybrid or a work from home worker. They're still counted as a quote-unquote commuter to those offices and other areas. So, it's not necessarily measuring the actual movement of those workers on the transportation system daily, but something to keep in mind how we get our data. And then also looking at how those commuters were moving by transportation mode. Single occupancy vehicle, otherwise known as driving alone without anyone else in your car, is still by far our most popular commute mode and has been for a while, from 2017 to 2024. By far the most popular mode. It's still actually just ticked a slight hair under 80% in the most recent American Community Survey data, but overall it's been above 80% for almost that whole time period. All of the other modes, including carpooling, which is the second most popular mode that was just recently surpassed from work from home between 2023 and 2024, are much lower. Transit did decline very slightly. It's the green line there, from 2017 to 2024, but it's still pretty flat, and then walk is almost zero, and other is very low as well. So we also looked at community crossings grants. These are the funding programs that our local communities here in Northwest Indiana heavily rely on to take care of their pavement conditions and on their more local roads, and then they would able to be funded with NERC-C federal funds that we administer. So this is still a vital program that's administered through the state. And this is looking at the amount of the awards for all of the Northwest Indiana communities combined in terms of the amount that was awarded by the bar chart. And then the line chart shows the number of communities that were awarded those grants across our region in any given year. So it's actually quite impressive to see that in some years of the Community Crossings Grant Program, there were as many as 37 communities that were awarded funding. So that's good news. And you can see that unfortunately there has been a precipitous drop-off since 2024 because of the amount of funding made available through the state. And that's only going to probably continue unless we get a different funding bill passed in the state. But you can see that it is good news that our region is receiving as many as, in some years, $40 million for these projects. but it has decreased a lot. We also looked at pavement condition, so this is the quality of pavements that you drive on. If you have a smooth ride, it would be considered a good pavement. A fair pavement is still considered acceptable, but poor pavement is where you are really noticing those potholes and those bumps. And so this is just looking at the whole picture on the arterial system here in Northwest Indiana. This was based on the most recent data we could find in 2023, so it might have changed a little bit since then. But in general, we see pavement conditions along interstates and major arterials are generally in good or fair condition, but there are still pockets of poor condition that remain. Especially, for example, on this is State Road 39 in LaPorte County. So some areas where the pavement hasn't lived up to its expectations. We also looked at bridge conditions. These are all of the bridges in Northwest Indiana, and categorized them into poor, fair, and good condition. And so, as you can see, there's a distinct pattern here. Almost all the bridges on the state road system, so like interstates, state highways, and U.S. highways, are usually in pretty good condition. INDOT takes care of those bridges. However, where you see poor bridges generally are county-maintained bridges where they don't have as much of a budget to take care of those bridges. So that's a little bit of an area of concern. But still, overall, it's not a terrible picture for our region. And this is, again, just looking at those bridges that are on the national highway system. This is the federally required performance measure that we're required to report on through the state planning system. And as you can see, these look much better overall, going back from all bridges to just the bridges on the national highway system. As you can see, there's a lot fewer poor bridges here, a lot more that are in good or fair condition. And then we also looked at 85th percentile speed. So we got speed data from looking at passively collected telematics data from vehicles, so cell phones or GPS systems within the vehicles. And you can see that this is the 85th percentile speed, where speed limits are supposed to be set based on. And the legend goes up to 82 miles per hour here. So there's some people that are going faster than those posted speed limits. But the key here is to notice that overall, this paints a pretty good picture of speeds in the 85th percentile across our interstate system and most of our arterials between communities. However, within communities where you have more friction of intersections and stoplights and all that, you see lower speeds, of course. And then look, this is the mean speed. So this is the 85th percentile. This is mean from the same data set. And the fact that the mean speeds follow almost an identical pattern as the 85th percentile speeds indicates that there is a reliable mobility for the motoring public. Again, we looked at the truck travel time reliability a few slides ago. That was looking just for trucks. This is looking for all vehicles. And so you can see that we would expect to see a high level of reliability. We also looked at a crash heat map from the 2020 to 2024 period. So this is showing a heat map of where crashes occurred. This is just all crashes. And this pattern shows that the crashes most frequently have been occurring in areas with more roads and more traffic. That makes sense, where you have a higher density in the road network, you're going to have more intersections, and also where traffic moves faster, you're going to see generally more crashes. And that's reflected in crashes that tend to cluster in the northwest area of our region, where we have the highest density of the road network and where we have more interstates. So that makes sense. And then this is a heat map just looking at injury crashes. So that same period of time from 2020 to 2024, where there are crashes involved in injury. And it's a very similar pattern if you toggle back and forth from the all crashes heat map. But we notice a little bit even more clustering in areas with higher speeds. Again, the interstate area, as you can see, where there's higher, because when vehicles are traveling faster, the crashes are more likely to result in injury. And then we look at, this is the fatal crash heat map. So this is where crashes from that same period of time resulted very unfortunately and tragically in a fatality. So in this case, the pattern is a little bit more randomly distributed. Sometimes there's just tragic, you never know what could be a factor in resulting in a fatality. However, we do notice that these are most pronounced in areas with high speeds and near intersections. It does move out a little bit. So those are that's for freight and roads, and I'm going to talk about transit. So in terms of our public transit system here, it's covered by several different fixed route providers. Fixed route providers are like where you get on a bus at a designated stop, or you get on that South Shoreline train, so you know exactly where the route is, and there's a schedule for it. And then demand response transit areas are those types of dial-a-ride services where you have to schedule the service. For example, Opportunity Enterprises, North Township, Transport, Lake County Community Services, and Porter County Aging and Community Services all operate these types of services. So here's a map of just our transit service area in our region, and that'll help orient it as I go through these next slides, just to keep this in mind of what our system looks like here in Northwest Indiana. As you can see, our fixed route system spans most of, operated by Gary Public Transportation System and Gary and Hammond. There's East Chicago has a fixed route system run by East Chicago Transit. Michigan City has a system run by Michigan City Transit, and the City of Valparaiso has the V line. So those are the fixed route systems in our region. Of course, there's also the South Shore Line. And actually, yes, the Monon Corridor that just opened last week is already showing here as well. However, most of the area is covered only by demand response services that don't have that fixed route service. So what does access to transit look like within a quarter mile of those fixed route systems? So this is looking at the traditionally underserved population change within a quarter mile of the fixed route transit from 2014 to 2024. The areas in light are the areas that were identified as having a concentration of traditionally underserved populations in both 2014 and 2024. So in other words, those areas were represented as traditionally underserved in both of those years. The areas in the medium color are traditionally underserved areas that were only measured in 2024, but back in 2014 were not identified as having a concentration of traditionally underserved populations. And then the areas in the darkest color were measured as having a concentration of traditionally underserved populations back in 2014, but no longer in 2024. And this shows that the traditionally underserved populations within a quarter mile of transit have spread out from the urban core areas where they were mainly in the darker colors to being now more outside of those urban core areas, which highlights the need for a more robust regional transit system to help serve those populations. And then we also looked, and this kind of just shows the numbers behind that analysis. So the performance measure we're looking at here is the change in traditionally underserved populations within a quarter mile of fixed route transit as a percentage of the total population within a quarter mile of fixed route transit. And so we looked at 2014 and 2024, and the number of traditionally underserved population within a quarter mile of fixed route transit, as well as the total population within a quarter mile of fixed route transit, actually decreased. Both of those groups decreased from 2014 to 2024. So the traditionally underserved went from 113,784 to 100,013. The total population within a quarter mile fixed route transit went from 222,000 to 214,000. And the percentage dropped as well, meaning that the traditionally underserved population decreased at a faster rate than the overall population within a quarter mile fixed route transit from 2014 to 2024. And then we also looked at, this is just total population change within a quarter mile of fixed route transit. So the same quarter mile transit sheds within those fixed route systems. The areas in purple is where you saw population growth, and the areas in the oranges and yellows are where you saw population decline from 2014 to 2024. So it's kind of a mixed picture overall. You see purple in some areas and yellows and oranges in others. So yeah, there's not really much of a total trend here that we can say, but when we look at employment, there's a better picture painted here. This is looking at not the population, but rather employment change in those within a quarter mile of fixed route transit. And you can see almost all of the areas here, or a lot of them are in purple, which indicates that, which is a telling sign that maybe transit-oriented development could actually be successful here, where you're seeing that employment is growing in those fixed route transit areas. That's a good sign. Whereas the picture of the population was a little bit less clear. And so here's the table kind of showing the numbers that went into those analyses here. So this is breaking down by the transit providers network. So for example, like the map just shows all the fixed route transit networks kind of combined, and this table kind of separates them out. So I apologize for using acronyms. That was the only way to really fit all these numbers on the slide. But ECT means East Chicago Transit. So as you can see, the East Chicago Transit area within a quarter mile of their network, their population did decline by 6.2%, but their employment actually rose by 11.6% in that same 10-year period. GPTC is Gary Public Transportation Corporation. Their population declined by 3.8%, but their employment did go up by 4.9%. MCT is Michigan City Transit. Their population declined by 2%, and also their employment declined by the same. McD is the South Shoreline, so their population declined by 2.8%, but their employment rose by 3.7%. And V-Line in Valparaiso, their population increased by 3.4%, but their employment increased even more quickly by 13.3%. So the total across all of those transportation or public transit networks, the population decreased by 3.47%, and the employment increased by 6.2%. So again, the employment picture is showing a better picture than the population. And then this just looks at the percentage of places that are served by fixed route transit. So we looked at some of the major destination types like universities, colleges, hospitals, casinos, cities, and towns that are served by fixed route transit. So it's good to see that the vast majority of cities are 82% of them are served by fixed route transit, and universities and colleges, 80% of them are served by fixed route transit. Casinos is also high at 75%, but unfortunately hospitals, only 33% of them are served by fixed route transit. In towns, only 20% are served by fixed route transit, but keep in mind that the population of towns does vary quite a bit, so that doesn't necessarily mean that we would expect that number to be high, but it still is only 20%. And then lastly, in this transportation analysis, we looked at some of the travel times from the South Shoreline stations to downtown Chicago. And so this just shows kind of the travel times. First of all, these are by train, so how long would it take you to get from these stop locations to downtown Chicago by train. As you can see, right now, or as of our most recent data, it would take 83 minutes from Michigan City, it would take 53 minutes from Munster Dyer, and as little as 33 minutes from Hammond Gateway. And those numbers kind of go out correspondingly from Hammond Gateway to the ends of the lines. So these are reasonable, and of course, when you're talking about train travel times, there's no worry about finding parking in Chicago because you're already on the train. So then we also looked at the travel times that it would take from these same stations by car, according to the Google Maps data for the peak periods, and you can see that they're longer than it would take by train in most cases, or the same or longer. So that's good. That means that the train is saving you time. Plus, keep in mind that these times, so for example, it takes 45 minutes during peak periods to get from where the Hammond Gateway station is into downtown Chicago, and it takes up to 85 minutes oftentimes from Michigan City and 60 minutes from Munster Dyer. But keep in mind that these travel times are, when you're in your car, you automatically, of course, need to find parking when you get to Chicago, and so that will take even longer. That's not captured here as well. So it probably pay more for the parking too. So that was just another layer of analysis that we did, and it's trying to paint a picture that the South Shoreline is a vital part of our transit system here. Are there any questions on the transportation section?
I have one question.
Yes.
In the past, there was a bus transportation for the areas such as Troy Ford, South Valparaiso, and Ford, and that disappeared. And now the only way we can get there is to take a limousine or to. Is there any plan to reestablish something like that, or a plan to identify how people can more easily get to the various locations that they did in the past? I don't expect an answer, but Tom?
Could you repeat the question? Could you restate the question?
Oh, the question is, there used to be bus service in Valparaiso and Portage and LaPorte, Michigan City, to go to the airport, and you could also stop off to go to, East Chicago and.
Okay, yeah, the Airport Express.
Right, Airport Express.
Yeah, that was a privately operated service.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, there's no.
Okay,
I'm not aware of any plans. Because we don't have an entity operating that, we have limited ability to, interview them and find out any information.
I understand, but I just wondered if there was anything in the works or any ideas from anybody that might know of anything.
I think in that specific case, that was an operator decision that University didn't really have any sway over. So
well, I understand that part. I just wondered if there was any initiative being taken to provide such a service.
Yeah, but that's a good question because I know, for example, as a resident of Valparaiso, like that park and ride lot that the shuttle was operating out of, like the city kept that land and uses it for other bus providers. So in theory, if there were to be a decision to bring it back, then the infrastructure would already be there for the city. I don't know what other communities where they had their lots, they might have already changed them to other land uses, so it would make it harder for them to come back. So I don't, it depends, or they would find new areas. But again, that's not something that we would directly have, but it's a good question.
Just one question, this is all great historical information. Is there any projections on what improvements that are coming to 8094 are going to have on the reliability and all of that? Because I know that's in the works now. It's going to be done over the next year.
Last week.
The I-8094 Flex Road project is one of those that NDOT is investing heavily in. It's some $200 million or so.
Have to wait till the 16th when NDOT's here.
Yeah. But that's a whole suite of basically variable speed limits, dynamic shoulder lanes during certain periods of time, ramp metering on the interchanges, all of that lane management. So that project, again, this was just presenting kind of the phase of the plan that we're in is the regional profile and performance report. So this is like the existing condition, so to speak. But the next phase will be to kind of plan more for the future and get stakeholder feedback on that. So.
Yeah, I think if I can just point out, one of the common themes that is pretty apparent looking at all these maps that Scott went through is, where's the congestion? Where are the truck crashes? Where are the vehicle crashes? All of that is concentrated on that stretch of 8094 between the state line and I-65. And that's where that project is happening.
Right.
So part of the environmental work and the planning and environmental linkages, the PEL study that NDOT did for that project, they have quantified some of the benefits that we would expect to see. We don't have those numbers readily at hand, but that would be a project that will be included in the plan, both as it's kind of like an update as far as what's going on and what travel time and safety improvements we expect to see from that project, but also it is included in our long-range transportation project plan, so we've modeled that as part of the network. And so we do have, I'm not sure if does the model show a lot of congestion relief? I don't think we have the ability really to do that.
We did a little, it shows there is a small improvement, but we don't get down into, we just kind of agreed with the methodology with our stakeholders, with CMAP and NDOT, but
it's a little bit hard for us to model through our regional model because it involves active management of the roadway. So we assume certain, not to get too far into the details, but we assume certain things like that there will be an additional travel lane during peak hours. But as far as like if there's a crash and they shut off that center lane,
it's hard to capture that.
Close that off and then shift the traffic. That type of management, we don't have the ability to model.
Yeah, our model has very coarse time slices, so it can't really go into the finer time slices where like capturing levels of incidents occurring.
I'm just curious what the next step is going to be after all these improvements are done and now the highways is maxed out and the lane changes are already figured in.
It's a very high capacity highway. It's East Coast to West Coast, so it's like you have no control. We cannot just in Indiana try to control it. It's going like national.
That's something we can bring up on the 16th with Adam Parkhouse or whoever is here from him.
Well, don't we typically see that every time road capacity increases, it gets better for a while, and then it gets back to where it was? So I wouldn't be too hopeful.
I just came through Atlanta, and Atlanta is still jam-packed with cars, and they've got 6 lanes on each direction.
I spent an hour yesterday driving from Miller to Highland on 94. I just got stuck. There was an accident, a semi-accident at Burr Street, and it was, I was stuck
So this meeting is taking like a longer time than usual,
Yes.
but because the next meeting in July. So we will be in a different phase of the MTP update. So we wanted to give you as much as we can, you know, like from all of this data and analysis. And then in July, we will have like some sort of like results and analysis but like, and it's it's gonna be like 3 months. So that's why it's crowded, but it's good data.
Okay. Well, if we could move right along, thank you, Scott.
Kathy.
And Kathy Luther is the next star of our show. And here's Kathy.
And I am sensitive that I am last, and y'all have been sitting here a while. So I'm going to try to keep this kind of short, and but I do have a couple. I'm hoping for some feedback. So I appreciate folks that are still here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about brownfields, a little bit about conservation and resilience, and a little bit about clean fuels. So this is one I actually want. This is sort of the traditional way that people present indicators about brownfields and cleanup sites. People think about brownfields, they kind of think about anything maybe contaminated or may look bad, and that's sort of the definition is that it looks bad and nobody can sell it. But in reality, there's a lot of different programs. They have different criteria. So if you pull up a map like this, you just get a lot of freckles. And in the past, we've changed that to like a density, like where's the most. But I started thinking about it more, and I don't think that's very useful for what's the condition of the region, how are we doing. Some of these sites were cleaned up 20, 30 years ago, but they're still on the map because they're still a dot. So I wanted to, here's another slide. So I had this idea, but I'd like to hear back from you what's useful. So because it looks like, I mean, I've spent a lot of time lately, and Grace has also, on this, all the different databases and trying to reconcile the number of sites and then say how many of these sites are cleaned up, or whatever the environmental risk is controlled, and they're being used. They're fine. They're on the map, but they're resolved. How many of the sites we know they're there, and then there's this group. I think there's going to be a group of sites in the middle. We know they're there because they had some assessment done, but maybe nothing happened, or because there wasn't a developer, and they're sitting somewhere in a redevelopment commission's profile. So turns out that's going to be a lot harder to do than I thought, but I'm willing to do it. But I wanted to think about what do people care about seeing as a performance measure for this category. And do you want all these separate programs split out, or would you rather just see a total sites?
Well, maybe you have this, but something I would find interesting would be some sort of bar chart or some display of the data that showed the surface area of the sites. Like how many of them are 1 to 5 acres, how many of them are, 50 to 100 acres, things like that.
I actually wanted to do that, and one of the things, I talked to Michelle today, I'm going to try to go get some help from item is, and we've had experienced this in the past with crash data. The geolocating doesn't line up well with the property parcels. And in fact, I found a couple of sites, I think there was a typo in the zip code, and they show up in Spain. I'm like, I don't think that's the right zip code.
Something I feel like I would find helpful is not necessarily if it's a petroleum site or, if it's a dry cleaner site, but like, what are the final restrictions on it, right? Because nothing's ever cleaned up to what we would consider clean, but like, does it have a drinking water or a well, or, does it have some sort of soil remediation if you're gonna have to do something on it after, but something like that might be helpful.
Yeah, I noticed there's sites that have an environmental restrictive covenant, which is a note on the deed, but it really just says, call item before you dig in this dirt.
Exactly.
So a lot of it tends to be, this can be used for industrial, but not residential. Or this can't be used for drinking water wells. Well, most of us are on public water supply in the urbanized area. So, is that really hurt? So, like number of sites with restrictions, is that useful? And then what level of detail, number of sites? I'm looking at Joe a lot because you.
I just wonder if there's a way of including like what the site can be used for, whether it's what the zoning is, because if you have brownfield sites and they're all residential, but can't remediate it for residential because the zoning is requiring residential, that could be information that might be useful as well.
So I think we don't have zoning, but we're gonna get zoning. Grace.
In that area, I have zoning, it's for some of
Okay.
the smaller.
So maybe if the restriction, if there's a conflict between the restriction and the zoning,
Yeah.
it might be interesting to highlight.
Because it might be usable for industrial, but it would not be usable for residential, for whatever reason.
Right, but if it's zoned residential, then you have a, okay, so use restrictions, if we can tie it to some kind of acre size, that would be,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Yeah, I know. So if anybody thinks of other things, I think, or maybe how long, you know, how long have they been cleaned up? I don't know. Some sites are, have a restriction, they have to be capped in vegetation. So that you can't build anything there, but maybe that's useful for my next topic. Oh, nope, it's not my
Well, I
next
was
topic.
just saying goodbye to Michelle.
What? Oh, did you have a?
I was just saying goodbye to Michelle.
Oh, okay, thank you. That was some good feedback. So, and then also, these are Scott actually made these slides, but I wanted them for it's one of the areas recommendations in the various climate plans we've worked on is electric vehicle growth. We do see that we have about it's less than 1%. It's increasing, especially the all electrics are increasing.
It's actually more than 1% in our region.
In our, yeah, this is statewide, but I think that in the Chicago climate plan projections where we had to get like 75% of electric vehicles being purchased by 2030 in order to have a full fleet turnover by 2050. Like, if we don't move them faster, we're not gonna have the fleet turnover that we need to make the reductions we need if you're interested in that type of emission reduction.
Isn't this likely to change dramatically as you get data for 25 and 26 and 27? Given the lack of, I mean, the charging stations are being discouraged. The subsidy for purchasing has gone away.
Yeah, I don't know, we probably will be revisiting this in 3 or 4 years. So.
I would say that only went up to 2024. That was
Yeah.
last year, the
Right.
tax credit. So we don't have data yet for 2024.
Yeah, we don't have.
I understand, but
Yeah.
I think you would expect a somewhat dramatic change.
Yeah, everybody got mad
I
at
think the manufacturers are even starting to back
Yeah,
off on
absolutely.
Yeah, they really, it's very
I mean,
frustrating
And
for me.
the whole political situation may
Yeah.
well change again,
Yeah,
and then everybody runs off in the other direction.
Although it could switch to more hybrid, you know, where you have a gasoline engine and a battery.
That probably makes more sense.
well, and this does include all 3 of those,
Yeah.
the battery hybrids that are run on just on gas is the kind of lighter blue. The darker blue is plug-in hybrid, that's what I have. Yeah, so it's all, it's all about scale, right? We're up to 50,000 statewide. And here's the charging stations that we have. So the gaps tend to be in the rural areas, and then in the very urban North Lake County areas. We do, I think we are going to have one more round of VW opportunities to apply for, but we're just kind of tracking that as an option because it does make a big difference in people's confidence to do that. And then we want to look at all the cleaner fuels. We have alternative fuel corridors designated for EV, compressed natural gas, hydrogen, liquefied natural gas, and liquefied petroleum. These designations are some of the designations we've achieved the criteria to be designated. Some of them we've been approved. It's been approved to be a corridor for that fuel, but has not yet met the criteria to be designated. I think our EV main corridors are in good shape. The dotted lines are the pending corridors. They still need 1 or 2 more stations to happen. What was I going to say? It's the 41, the southbound ones are, there's a lot of stations like kind of funded in progress, so we're probably gonna have the 41 and 65 within the next few years for the EV. No, yeah, the first map is EV, they're numbered. But they've changed the rule, the Department of Energy or Department of Transportation has changed the rules a little bit, like states can define their own certification criteria. So it may not be the same as all the other states, but at least you know you can get your fuel, whatever type of fuel you need within a half mile of the corridor. And just a little bit I wanted to talk about how we're looking at managed land and natural areas. We've had a 13% increase in managed land in the last 13 years, which is countywide information. But we've also been working, NRPC's worked with a whole consortium of conservation groups. Right now we've done it for the Lake Michigan watershed. DNR has a grant and they're working with a team at Purdue to kind of expand the information south to the Kankakee. These purple areas have the highest conservation value. They're the best of what's left. And so we're trying to focus more on, the conservation groups are more interested in conserving the best of what's left and not conserving everything. And I think that that's sometimes a misunderstanding of what the conservation community wants to do is, they just want to prevent anything, and that's not actually necessarily true. So of our priority acres, there's about 36,000 acres that are priority in Lake Michigan Basin because they are big enough assortment of sites that they provide adequate habitat and adequate function. About 37% of those are already managed by a DNR or a park or an entity that is actually interested in that. And some of these categories are squishy, like I would say the Little Cal in the flood control. Most of it's owned by the the Little Cal River Basin Commission. But they're doing restoration a section at a time. So anyway, we hope that in a few years we'll be able to cover the whole county-wide for these priority areas. I had some other slides about resilience, but I took them out because I knew I was last.
Thank you, Kathy. Any questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank everybody. Grace, you did yours first, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't. She was listed last on your agenda. The next Economy in Place meeting is scheduled for July 8, 2026 at 10 a.m. Same time, same location. And I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And any questions or anything for the good of the order before we close? Hearing nothing, meeting adjourned. Thank you all. And those of you who would like to talk to me about